on to our first presentation, and that's the 2018 Canada Organic Agricultural Data Report, looking specifically at the Prairie region, but putting that in the context of the Canada Organic Agricultural Data Report. So we're very pleased to have Tia Lofsgaard and Diana Zayden. I've never said your last name out loud, Diana, so I apologize if I've pronounced it incorrectly. Tia is the Executive Director of the Canada Organic Trade Association. She's worked in the field of organic and international agricultural trade for over 20 years. She got her start in the business by founding the first ever fair trade organic chocolate company, Camino. Thank you for that. And has held senior roles with Fair Trade International, most recently as their Chief Operating Officer of Fair Trade America. She is currently a voting member on the Organic Standards Technical Committee, on the Organic Value Chain Roundtable, and holds leadership positions on several committees and task forces in the sector. Tia joined CODA in 2016. And then and Diana Zayden will also be presenting data for us. And Diana joined CODA in 2018 as a volunteer and is since 2019 working part-time as a special projects coordinator. Diana is a PhD candidate in development studies at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. I just probably butchered that. And holds an MA in comparative development studies from the same university. Diana's academic work focuses on questions related to the development of development policies and aid in the Middle East. She is also currently working as a service delivery consultant for the Canadian Immigrant Integration Program funded by our IRCC to give pre-arrival support to approval immigrants. So thank you both, and we're going to hand the floor over to you.
Great. So, hello everybody. This is Tia speaking, and thanks, Marla, for the great long introduction, and you're welcome for bringing chocolate into the organic world here. So just to highlight that CODA has been collecting data on behalf of the organic sector for quite a few years. We do a national study, but we in particular have been commissioned by the POGI project in the last 4 years, to put together data reports specific to the Prairie region. So just to highlight that, this is a component of the work that we do, and I just want to acknowledge all the organic certification bodies, all the associations that have worked very hard, and in particular Laura Telford from the Manitoba government, who has been helping us to finesse the details of the data. Just wanting to highlight that it's not an easy task. We put out a template to all the certification bodies, but ultimately we're always grateful for whatever they can give us back, and sometimes it doesn't match up with the format that we need for comparative purposes. So we will run through this slide that we've got, but just to highlight that we are not final, like the final report, we're still modifying. So we're going to provide a link to our Shopify site that's in this deck, and that is where the final report will be that will highlight the final. But everything's pretty okay, I would say. We've just got a few operators we need to recode, so no major discrepancies. Diana's been working on this for months and months. And so I'm going to hand it over to Diana to be able to go through the details of the report, which she's been working with intimately. So over to you.
Okay, thanks, Tia, and thanks, Marla, for the introduction. So, we'll just have 10 minutes, so I'll try to be as quick as possible. So, in this short presentation, as you see in the outline slide, we'll touch on our data collection methodology and the challenges we faced, and then we'll present the key findings for the prairies and each province. And then we'll present the actions that will follow the release of the report, and Tia is the one who's going to talk to you more about that. So regarding the methodology, just a few points here. This analysis includes only the operations and acreage that are certified organic, as defined by the Canadian Organic Standards, and learning from previous year where we had some suspended operators that occur at the end of the year that came off suspension, which affected a lot of our hemp numbers. So we made sure that this year everything was well was well written and aggregated in our tables. Also, when we talked about processors, it includes food and feed processors and handlers and feed cleaners and abattoir and broker buyers and for exporters and operators with packaging and labeling certificates. However, we do not have enough info regarding on-site processing because some certifying bodies were not very clear or were not declaring those as processor, which is something we have to work on for the upcoming or coming years. Also, we did not include input sets processor, which could explain some decrease in terms of processors. We also realized that some of the certifying bodies have declared some master feeds as inputs instead of processor, which is why we're still modifying numbers right now. This all means that we'll need to get more info for next reports on the types of certificates to have more clear data on how to aggregate numbers regarding operators and regarding processors, I mean. So yeah, each year we're improving the way we collect and aggregate the data. Therefore, some of the figures that might appear in this 2018 report may not align with past reports released by COGI or by CODA. So to go quickly on the key findings of the report, as you can see on the next slide, you have here like the numbers and the progress from 2014 to 2018. So overall, the prairies represent 27% of total organic operations in Canada, 30% of organic crop producers, including grain, fruit, and vegetable producers, 15% of organic processors, 16% of organic livestock operations, and 56% of organic acres. So this, as you can see, there's a progress in terms of total operation crop producers, and it's been very stagnant in terms of like livestock, decrease in livestock and little, not even progress in processors. So this is just the quick numbers. Now, if we move to the analysis of the data on the next slide, we can tell that, first of all, the number of organic operations in the prairies has increased steadily since 2014. Compared, however, with 2017, the numbers of processors have remained steady last year in 2018. And the decrease in number of organic livestock operation is more significant, and it mirrors the overall decrease in livestock operation in mainstream also farming across the country, so in conventional and in organic farming all over. The part of organic operations in the prairies in total operation is also decreasing, not because there are less operators in the prairies, but because Quebec and Ontario numbers are increasing also pretty fast. Also, the decrease in numbers of organic livestock operation is more significant, and it reflects most probably, if we want to analyze it, a shift in consumers' choice of eating probably less meats and more plant-based foods. So this is affecting the number of operators that do livestock in the prairies, and also overall, not only in the prairies. And since 2014, there has been a steady increase in organic operation, as we said, across the prairies region. Manitoba total operation increased by 46, Saskatchewan by 126, and Alberta has seen the largest growth with 333 more operators than in 2014. To the next slide, when we talk about acreage, so you can see the table that we have. So there are much more information and other charts in the report. I just picked one of them here, but overall what we can say is that the prairie's organic acreage has been stable for the last 2 years and setting at approximately 1.8 million acres in 2018. As we said previously, 56% of the organic acres are in the prairies. Saskatchewan represents 63% of the prairie's organic acreage, Alberta 31%, and Manitoba 6.5%. In 2018, the land use for organic field crop production exceeded the one that is used for livestock, forest, green manure, wall crafting, and ecological areas. This reflects the growing economic importance of field crop production and the decline of livestock for the reason I stated previously. Field crops are 53% of organic acres, cereal 68% of field crop, and pulses 10% of organic acres in the prairies, but they represent 97% of all organic pulses acres across Canada. And pasture, forage, and natural area make up most of the remaining organic land in the prairies, representing 48% of the organic acreage in the prairies. And the rest is fruits and vegetables, which is only 7%. Cereals are the largest subcategory of field crops in the prairies, 66% of national organic field crop acreage. And there is a significant growth of wheat acreage. So if there is one number we need to retain of one type of crop is the wheat. But however, there are absolutely no new entrants in wheat production, which could be analyzed as there are more crop producers that are shifting to wheat. And yeah, so as you can see in the next slide, there you can see the growth of the increase of wheat, a lot in Alberta, Alberta, and a lot in Saskatchewan, and even though there's a small decrease in Manitoba. For the first time in 2018, we've been collecting data on the type of wheat that is being planted. So as you can see, most of the wheat is spring wheat, which is 54% of the total, and the other number is the other type of wheat, which include millet, quinoa, and some cereal with no details listed. So it will be interesting for the upcoming years to know what we mean by other, not just millet and quinoa. So that could be for the upcoming years. Now, if we move to the provincial report, so the next slide, you'll see the information for Alberta here. And again, I just because, we don't only have 10 minutes, I didn't put the whole acreage table, but this will be released very soon when the report will be out. So in Alberta, pulses and the other field crop categories have seen the greatest growth among all categories. Peas in particular are becoming very popular in Alberta, an increase of 280% from 2016 into 2018. 61% of organic peas is grown in the prairies. Is now in Alberta. Also, a big increase in oilseed in comparison to 2015. The acreage of oilseed has expanded by about 49%. So the next slide for Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has been the same for previous years, has the largest organic sector in the Prairie region. Total organic operation have increased from 926 in 2014 to 1,051 in 2018 The province has also experienced a steady increase in the number of organic crop producers from 761 to 964 in 2018. And the acres in Saskatchewan have increased by 29% since 2014, and the province represents 35% of all organic acres in Canada, which is a lot. Because wheat is the number for for 2018, it has increased by 93,000 acres. Which is a 55% growth in acres. However, there is a decline in barley and kamut, and mainly the decline in kamut reflects probably the interruption of the export market to Europe that resulted from the requirements on glyphosate that are being imposed on kamut being imported or exported from Canada. Now, if we move to Manitoba, we see that the total number of acres have increased by 32% from 2015 to 2018. The cereal category is the main category where we can increase 15,900 acres since 2015. And then we have the forest green manure and natural area category, 13,700 acres that are added since 2015. There is an increase of 24% in cereal acreage, and pulses also saw a significant increase of 93%, rising from 2,800 in 2015 to 5,400 in 2018. So these are just a summary of the data, much more analysis, much more tables, much more charts in the upcoming report. Pia, for the next step.
Whoa, that was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And you will note, as she was speaking, I was noting that there's a few numbers that she said that were different than here. That is because we have not finalized it, and we're just updating it sort of real time with comments and recongregation of data. So just to highlight that, it's quite a process. The link that we've got at the bottom of the next slide will host the final version. And we're hoping to have that out in the next couple days, but we're just sort of formatting and recongregating, bringing in the feedback. So stay tuned for that, and please don't refer to these final slides here. Refer to the final report for your purposes. Just to highlight that we have a meeting with CFIA coming up to discuss data collection. When I asked CFIA before we had finalized our tally, I'd asked them for what is their number of operations compared to 2017. They said a 13.5 increase. We know our numbers never match, and we want to find out, and they have a willingness to discover why it is that they never match. They don't have a breakdown by, processor, by farmer, by XYZ, but it seems that there's an appetite now within CFIA to have better data. So we will be having that meeting hopefully sometime later in July. Just to highlight that, following that meeting as well, we consistently have meetings with Stats Canada, as well as with the Organic Value Chain Data Task Force. We meet frequently every month. In fact, we have a meeting coming up next week to talk about where and why are there these data gaps. So we have quite a ambitious work plan coming up, but to highlight that we hope to release the 2018 national numbers by Organic Week, or a little bit in advance to the organic sector so we can all use it for promotional purposes, but that is quite a process to get there. We are a good many months ahead of schedule thanks to the program of POGI ending by June, so it forced us to back up the data collection process, but I think it's been really positive, and we'd like to be able to keep on that schedule for future years. There are certainly lessons learned, which we'll be highlighting and discussing and building into how we can work, moving forward to correct those data gaps. And the other point I want to make is that we really are interested in the labor side of things, which has been a huge data gap for the sector. And we have a meeting coming up with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resources Council and Stats Can to look at what is collected by each one of the different parties. And it would be fantastic if we could actually aggregate that out in future reports. Whether it can only be done on a national basis or specific to province is yet to be determined. But I think that there's a lot of good work that's gone into this. And again, just to highlight our thanks to the certification bodies for providing the data and, putting up with all of our endless questions. So thanks, Marla, and back to you.
All right. Well, thank you to you both for the presentation, and I know all of the work that goes into the data collection and putting this together. And I know that in Saskatchewan, I really appreciate this project in particular being funded by POGI because it was the first time in Saskatchewan that we actually had data, about our sector, and which seems a little crazy, especially if you're coming from the non-organic world where you're pretty data rich. So, all of the points that you raised, Tia, about, some of the challenges and, how that's reflected, making all of the qualifications about the data. I always use that as a teaching point whenever I'm speaking with anybody in provincial or federal government, just about, the need for those two levels of government to be collecting data on our behalf so that we can grow and develop the sector. So this is a really great tool, kind of in the here and now. And for me, it's also a really great advocacy tool. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to open it up for questions. So over to the folks on the call. We have about 4 minutes. If there's one or two questions about the data.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Yes. Hi,
And your
this is
name?
Eric Pacer. Yeah, Eric Pacer, Canadian Organic Growers. I have a question on the barley section and decline of barley production. That is, I assume that includes malting barley for the brewing industry as well, or have you parsed that out?
I
We will
don't.
get back to you. I think we have to look into it, Eric, and we can come back to you. But we don't get very good detailed data in regards to like specifics like that. And even just trying to break down the wheat, you can see that a lot of people code things as other wheat. So we can take a peek and get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Grateful for the data that we have. So thank you again for the work that you've put into it. And I'm assuming, well, there will be some information that will go out or an email that will go out when the report itself is, I guess, a press release and all that kind of jazz. So folks on the call will know when that final report is available. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll move on to our second presentation on our topic on organic market update.
Hello, this is David Becker, and I'm the organic and grain non-GMO analyst at the Jacobson. The Jacobson is a publisher, an analyst, a forecaster, and a consultant. And during the course of today's presentation, I will go through some slides that I put together that discuss the organic grain supply and demand within the United States and potentially how they affect grains in Canada. So I'm going to just quickly go through the presentation. The Jacobson believes that demand of organic corn and soybeans will remain stable during the balance of 2019, while supply, which is due to the weather in the United States and the Midwest, should produce an uneven harvest. We believe that the Midwest weather will create that uneven harvest and sort of a larger, more even supply in the West Midwest and a more shaky supply that could be extended out to the spring in the eastern Midwest. Imports of organic corn and organic crack corn are projected to come in slightly lower than they did in the 2017-18 season and the 2016-17 season. Organic corn and crack corn imports make up about 23% of supply and 23% of total use in the United States, and we believe that it will remain unchanged. Imports of organic soybeans and soybean meal are forecast to rise by about 7% in the 2018-19 season. So for us, that goes until September. Imports of organic soybeans and soybean meal make up about 68% of total supply and 74% of total use within the United States. Organic soybean meal imports should continue to increase during the 2019 and 2020 season. Importers see the opportunity to sell product into the United States for feed, and that is likely to continue to be stable to slightly accelerate. U.S. acreage of organic corn planted was expected to increase about 5%. So we saw based on transitional acreage that we thought there would be a 5% increase, and now with the change in weather, it could potentially be a 5% decrease of organic corn and soybeans planted. And we also noticed that the 20% drop in organic corn prices that have occurred over the last 10 months have somewhat coincided with a decline in organic wheat, especially milling wheat that's from Canada. So then I put together a bunch of slides which will give you an idea of what I look at consistently. These are graphs of organic corn and organic crack corn in metric tons. We calculate these two ways. We forecast them based on getting vendor numbers, which come in at the end of any given month. So at the end of June, I will have the numbers for June, which are my estimates. And then on a delayed basis, we get numbers from the U.S. Customs Department that are put through the Foreign Agricultural Service, which we then use to update. For the most part, the numbers are on target. What you can see from the charts is that The combination of organic corn and organic cracked corn have been relatively steady and should continue to remain steady as importers see opportunities within the United States. Cracked corn is a product that's cracked, and so tracking it from the Foreign Agricultural Services perspective in the U.S. Customs Department is much more difficult. It doesn't come through as its own individual number, which makes reporting it much more difficult. We use a few vendors to be able to get those numbers looking at bill of ladings. In my next slide, it shows organic soybean and soybean meal imports. It looks like from the charts that you can see there has been a decline or somewhat of a downward trend in organic soybean imports in metric tons, which has coincided with an increase of organic soybean meal imports within the United States, showing us that, the demand obviously is for soybean meal into feed, and people are much more willing to and continue to be willing to buy soybean meal and not have to crush it themselves. The data I collect, I put into the form of a balance sheet for the Jacobson clients so they have an idea of what our thinking is in terms of both supply and demand. Our U.S. organic grain acreage yield and production are calculated and matched off against what we perceive as feed demand, which is mainly driven in the United States by broilers, layers, turkey, and dairy. Feed demand for the grains, mainly corn and soybeans, and as well as feed wheat, make up 97% of the for soybean meal and corn that is consumed. So I was at a particular point in my presentation where I was talking about our balance sheets. If everybody on the call is at that particular level, I'm up to a sheet that says organic corn balance sheet. And so what I do is produce as best as I can and information about organic corn, both the supply and the demand within the United States. It also includes the supply that I perceive from the harvest, imports, which include organic corn and organic cracked corn, and then demand. And then basically what you would find in the United States if you saw this on the conventional side. The last time a balance sheet was created by the U.S. Department of Agriculture was in 2016 for organic products. So this is one of the few organic corn balance sheets that you would be able to look at, which provides my view of what's going on. And so from a national perspective, we have the acre planted, the beginning stock, the imports of whole corn and organic cracked corn, then the total supply, along with for the 2018-19 season, the total projected supply, and then the demand. And I'll go through how I get demand numbers after in a little bit. It also then shows you the imports as a total supply and total use for the different seasons. The next slide is organic soybeans and soybean meal balance sheet, and the concept is very similar. Acres planted along with beginning stocks, the supply that comes out, a number from supply that creates a bean meal number, which is crushed, and then imports of organic soybeans as well as soybean meal. The soybeans are then converted into meal numbers so we can get a number that's meal-oriented. The demand for soybeans, for the most part in the United States, are soybean meal, and that number, again, is shown along with the carryout, and then the imports as a percentage of total supply and total use. The next slide is something I put together that's an organic dairy index. So the demand in the United States for most of the products that are feed-oriented are proteins. And so what we do is we calculate demand as a function of UPC scan data from large big box stores as well as supermarkets, so we have a very, very up-to-the-minute gauge of what demand is. For example, total organic chicken that is sold in an individual month by value. We calculate back a unit price from those values that we're able to see. We combine that with specific animal inventories that we know throughout the different regions of the United States to then come up with a feed number for feedlot, breaking it down into the energy components, which are mainly corn, crack corn, as well as feed wheat, and then the protein components, which for the most part are soybean meal. The dairy index that I have in front of you is a combination of milk, organic butter, organic cheese, and organic yogurt sold in the United States on a monthly basis from big box stores and supermarkets. But, if you ask me, what is the organic sandwich bread sold in the United States, I have that information as well. So I'd be able to say the 25% year over year in the up to May 2018, and then for the last year, it has leveled off completely, decelerating, so only up 3% year over year. Same thing for something like organic wheat flour, and we create indices based on that kind of information. The next slide gives just an overall overview, which, in listening to the CODA presentation, what was clear, which stuck out for me, was the increase in organic wheat production, which is something that the Jacobson has heard from the different merchandisers and farmers we speak to in Canada. And in conjunction with that, we've seen a large decline in the price of organic corn here in the United States from August forward, so over the last 10 months, August 18 to the current date. And the drop in feed wheat prices has come in conjunction with that, taking away some of the floor. The combination of the larger production and, maybe falling demand has led to that. And although we don't follow specifically the Canadian prices, this is my particular gauge of what's going on. Organic corn prices declined with sort of an increase in acres that we had in the United States, as well as solid imports from both organic corn and organic crack corn. Over the balance of the year in the United States, there should be a continued increase in organic corn imports. The imports will come in the United States from Argentina. Argentina imported 87,000 metric tons of organic corn last year into the United States. Our perception from people who bring that in is that it will either remain steady or increase slightly, maybe up to 5%. We believe that the harvest will remain robust within that particular area. There's definitely a view that importers will look toward Romania to bring corn into the United States, and then the crack corn comes in from a wide breadth of countries. It can't be tracked by the Customs Department. Organic corn is brought into countries that usually, in some cases, don't even produce that much organic corn crack, and then we bring it to the U.S. We believe that will still continue to happen. And so on the demand side, we think things stable, and we're not sure how the harvest will play out. As I mentioned before, last slide, we are an analysis, publishing, consulting organization. I've put together my contact information. We offer a 4-week free trial of the product that I produce. No credit card, no strings. If you want to try it and take a look, you click on the link that I have there at the bottom. And that's all for me.
All right. Well, thank you, David. I think we'll wait for questions until after Sam's presentation. So I'm hoping you'll be able to stay on the line with us for that. Sam, over to you.
Yeah, can everybody hear me, or can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you. I am actually doing this from our Rycroft facility here today, so it's been nice to be out on the prairies again. But what my goal is to tie some of what David and the Coda presentation is, maybe dial that back into what does that mean to a Canadian farmer, which everything's kind of trending the same way from David's and Coda's, and mine's probably going to fall right into place as well. We do have increased supply. Demand definitely does seem to be plateauing a little bit. It's definitely not decreasing. We are seeing growth in the organic marketplace. It's just not growing at the levels that we've seen in years past. So the first slide that I have here is just a sheet that I update, once or twice a year, just more gauging where the market's been and where it is today. Wheat peaked there right in that 2013 through 2015, and we are starting to see it come down, just with increased supply, and it has been harder to push feed wheat into the U.S. for reasons that David just described. We've had a robust corn crop, and on top of that, the import market is gobbling up 20 to 25% of, or 23, I think is the number that he used, of the demand. So there's lots of markets trying to grab onto the U.S. feed market, and that definitely does affect the Canadian farmer. Oats, milling oats and milling barley has been pretty flat over the years. I would expect 2019 to probably be softer on both of those markets moving forward, but nothing too drastic, I wouldn't think. So, moving on to the next slide. Sorry, my computer's a little bit slow even on my own here. Conventional versus organic. This is one that I track as well. It seems like when we venture too far away from the conventional market, it definitely will open up a window for other countries to sneak grain into the U.S. market. And really, this is what I have an arrow there on when imports make sense. And this is, when I say imports, this is imports from countries outside of North America and going into the U.S. It really comes between 250 and 300%. If you get over 300%, you're really opening up that window for other countries to come into the U.S. Markets. All right. So really, right now, wheat's not in a position. Now that prices have come back down a little bit, I don't think we'll see a ton of offshore wheat coming into the marketplace. I think the market corrected itself enough where it's not going to. I don't think we'll see outside markets taking North American market share. So what I did was I took on this next slide, I took prices in 2 points into the U.S., like the Midwest. And when I say Midwest, I'm talking like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, that market for feed corn. And I tried to relate it back to what does that mean to a Canadian farmer, delivered to a point in Alberta. So this first slide is actually related back to I use basically a Rycroft number, but to be honest with you, the rates out of Rycroft versus Edmonton are very comparable. So when you're looking at going into California, and then I also use as a point Stockton, because that is where a lot of like the crack corn and corn go into. Not all of it, but you do see a good chunk of that market ending up in Stockton. It's a good central location to use. So right now the current market is plus or minus $10 a U.S. dollar per short ton at Stockton, plus or minus $10 a ton is what it seems to be trading at. And so what that means to a Canadian farmer is, slightly right at about $3 for feed oats. You're looking at $6 for feed barley, and just above $8 for feed wheat delivered to a rail location in Alberta. And really to get to like prices that I feel like farmers are a lot more comfortable selling. We need that corn market to jump to like $450, $500 a ton, a U.S. dollar per short ton to get to a price level where I think there's going to be a little bit more fluidity for a Canadian farmer to start selling and feel comfortable selling their feed grains and be competitive. Now, to note on this, what I did with feed wheat is I used feed wheat at about 85% of the value of corn and feed oats at 75% of the value of corn. And that's to my knowledge how a lot of feed mills value it versus corn. And that's not exact. That's in my opinion how I've seen feed mills value feed oats and feed wheat versus corn. And feed barley, I think, in the U.S., if they're feeding feed barley, I use that as a 1-to-1, but they probably don't view it that way. But to be very honest, I don't see a ton of feed barley moving into the U.S. market right now. In my mind, it's fairly non-existent. A lot of the feed barley that's moved stays in Canada. So if we value that to the Midwest, Alberta is at a disadvantage because it's further away. So right now, moving feed grains out of Alberta into the Midwest it's a very hard thing to do based off of where corn values are at. Not impossible. The one that I think probably has the most optimism, which isn't on this chart, would be feed peas. But sending feed wheat to the Midwest market is a very hard thing to do. Feed oats as well. It just doesn't pencil. You'd be better off selling the feed oats into the conventional market at that point, which I'm not encouraging people to do. But so really, we're dependent on that West Coast market moving feed oats. If we move to the next slide, I did the same thing, but more for Saskatchewan farmers. And the point of origin on that is I just use Saskatoon. If you're in the southeast part of Saskatchewan, these prices get quite a bit better as well, just based off of freight rates. So that southeast corner, southern Saskatchewan, those farmers are typically going to have a lot better chance at selling feed grains into the Midwest and into California as well. And on this chart, things are a little bit more even. Rail rates from Saskatoon down to Stockton are fairly similar to Edmonton, that area. But again, relatively speaking, if Stockton corn is at $400, you're at values that farmers in Canada, they're not real attractive for organic farmers. So, you'd still have to look for that corn market in the U.S. to hit a $450, $500 mark. And in the Midwest, it's the same. You need to get to $400 or $450 in order for prices to get really attractive for the Canadian feed grains to move down into those markets. That's not to say that people and buyers aren't buying Canadian feed grain. They are, and they're paying values better than what I'm showing here on this chart. But they're up against the wall as well as trying to put your grain against a fairly cheap corn price. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is basically from CODA. This is just goes to show you where organic acreage in Canada has gone. I do feel like we will grow again this year with organic acreage and producers. But I do actually think that that's starting to level off as well. I don't think we will see as many people jump into the organic market as producers and processors as we've seen in the past. But time will tell, I guess. This is just a quick blurb on the organic oat market growth. This is the way I viewed it based off of like information that we have. We have a lot of information on organic oats. So it is, the demand is just leveling off, and that's we're just reaching a point where there's a lot of SKUs on the store shelf. The stores are very competitive in the bar markets. If you go to Target or any grocery store down here, it's a whole aisle of bars, and so there's a lot of people chipping away at the retail space, and we have to be competitive as an industry. And I think moving forward, we do have some challenges on that front, but the nice thing about it is we're still seeing growth, and that's reassuring for us as a company and for myself in general. I think any growth is good growth, and I don't view our organic market as shrinking any time in the near future. More down to the nitty gritty, we will carry some 2018 crop into the 2019 crop this year, I think, in all grains in Canada. Oats, wheat, flax is maybe one of the more tighter markets, I would say. But even in that front, there will be carry out. Organic supply in Canada is healthy. We are not expecting a good U.S. crop. I'm speaking primarily for oats, but as David spoke, and we do buy a pile of food grade milling corn as well, and on that front, we have a long road ahead of us. The organic Midwest corn market will have not great yields, I don't think, and not very good quality. So I don't expect a lot out of the upper Midwest crop in the U.S. But the crop is in the ground, and now it's, I guess, in God's hands, and we'll see what happens. But, the shortage out of the U.S. for oats, we aren't worried at all. We do think that will get replaced out of Canada fairly easily. Parts of Canada are dry, but overall Canada is well ahead of the upper Midwest on planting and plant development. And there's no major concerns out there for our organic crop right now unless we continue to see dry weather patterns, which could happen. But as somebody just told me today that there's now flood warnings for the Regina, we'll just call it the number one highway corridor. So if that's true, we're going to go from very dry to very wet. So I don't know what that means to us just yet, but it's been an interesting year weather-wise, and that's all across the board. I think we've seen some fairly extreme weather throughout the prairies, starting in the U.S. all the way up to La Crete. So yeah. I think that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you, and look forward to any questions.
Great. Thank you, Sam and David. So I'm going to pass it over to folks on the call for questions.
I have a question.
Great. Thank you. And just say your name.
Jay O'Brien.
Hi, Jay.
Hey there. So I had a question about how the carryout numbers are, I guess, gathered, or how they're determined.
Are you talking in Canada or in the U.S.?
For the U.S.
Okay, so the carryout numbers that I calculate are basically the total supply, as I see it, minus the total demand for a given year, and that's what I perceive as the total projected ending stocks.
Thank you.
Okay. It's the same for Canada as well, then?
In Canada, I don't put a number on it, and there's no real good way for me to do that other than based off of what we're hearing from farmers, and that's all I have to go off of right now. And I mean, if I had to pick a number, there's 1 million bushels of organic oats that's probably not going to get bought this year, or will get carried by processors into next year. And from what I've heard from the wheat market, there's at least that in wheat as well. But that's a shot in the dark. I mean, it is a very hard thing to do on the organic side, unless you're backing into it like David's doing.
Okay, thank you. One more question before we move on?
My name is Marlo Glass, and I just have a quick question. I know that David spoke a little bit about what the future of the organics market is looking like, but I was just curious if there was anything else on the horizon that, as an industry, you guys are watching or excited about, and kind of what future success is going to look like.
I can give you my view of the U.S. market. There are two things that I continue to look at. The first is the organic broiler business, as well as the egg business, but mainly the broiler business continues to increase at about a 11 to 13% year-over-year increase. So that bodes well, because that's the majority of the demand within the United States, and that's where the demand comes from for organic corn. Secondly, I believe that there is going to be an opportunity to be able to, from Canada into the U.S., import more yellow and green peas, especially organic and non-GMO peas. We are still a net importer of organic peas. The increase in plant-based foods has created a dearth of supply of both non-GMO and organic peas in the U.S. Most of the imports have come in from Canada over the last 3 years. We had a huge increase in imports from Russia in January, about 5,000 metric tons. That was the largest 1 month import that we've seen in the United States. Plant-based foods are getting high profile, with Beyond Meat stock price going from 42 to 193, I think I saw yesterday, and that's coming into a lot of the fast foods. So that type of protein, pea protein, or even soybean protein, or any type of protein that's going to be able to be used in plant-based burgers, is something that I'm excited about. The plant-based milk industry, especially on the organic and non-GMO side, has exploded and done very well. Demand has somewhat plateaued a little bit. Year-over-year increases is right around 10%. But I think in this, the plant-based burger idea or chicken nugget idea, like Tyson has, introduced a plant-based nugget, I think has a lot of legs.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sam, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that really the plant-based proteins are for sure something to watch. He touched on on plant-based milks as well, and that's something like that for us as a company. Oat milk is something coming up that I think will dictate a lot of demand moving forward. A lot of that isn't necessarily organic to date, but that's not to say that eventually that market taps into the organic side of it as well. So that's something that we probably would be watching very closely. I agree with him on the pea front. I think that there's going to be opportunity there, especially as you see articles come out with some of the chemical residues on not organically bought plant-based proteins. So I think there will be a sector of the market demanding more of an organic base for that side as well. Yeah, I think those are probably the two major ones for sure.
Right. And just kind of in support of the dairy farmers, I believe they say plant-based beverage, that it's not actually milk. But no, absolutely.
Well, but on that same note, I mean, you're seeing a decrease. Or, the organic milk market is got some headwind in front of it. So, and the milk market in general has some headwind, and that's a fact, and they're feeling it.
Yeah, for sure. I just think that, things are shifting, and it's pretty bumpy out there, I think, and to know exactly in what direction everybody's kind of, shining off their crystal ball, right, to see where it's gonna go next. I think, I guess just to kind of wind up this section, because we are running a bit over. For me, listening to the presentations, obviously my biggest concern is around, or the flag for me is around the imports, right, coming from other countries, going into what has always been Canada's biggest export market, the U.S., right? So if 23% of the feed market is now displaced by imports from countries like Argentina, it's like how, this is really to, Canadian folks on the call, like how are we going to respond to that, and how do we build or maintain or develop a competitive advantage in this area, or where do we go next, or kind of some of the questions that I'm thinking of. And that pea market, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking that for about, I don't know, maybe 18 months on the prairies, and I know those farmers up in La Crete will be very happy to hear that there's going to be a market for the peas that they have. So that's, really great. And then I was, all excited about that. And then I heard David say that they had the biggest import of peas from Russia in January, to date. So, the possibility of just being displaced, right, is something that, I don't want to be alarmist, but that the numbers seem to be indicating that, definitely we're feeling the, that global commodity market impact on the prairies. So, that's all I'll say. Hopefully some of that was correct and not just me pontificating. So thank you again for that. We're going to quickly move on now to the Prairie Organic Grain Initiative evaluation.
Thank you, Marla. I'm very happy to be here today, and was very happy to work on the evaluation for the Prairie Organic Grain Initiative, and happy to present this final report today. So the report, I believe, has been sent out as a link to those of you who are on the call today, and it will be released on the website soon. So I'll just talk through some of the high-level findings in the report, and then we'll have questions after. So we carried out the evaluation to get a high-level understanding of how well POGI achieved its goal of increasing stability and resilience in the organic grain sector. And we also made recommendations for what to continue and what to change as the work continues. So one thing I'll say is, unfortunately, there is currently no funding secured for the POGI program to continue as it has been running, but the partners have been working hard to pursue more funding to keep the work going, and Organic Alberta is continuing to maintain the website and the 1-800 number as kind of base functions of the work. And then in terms of the evaluation, what we did to investigate our question of how well POGI worked to achieve the goals was we talked to many farmers, 80 farmers, including those who are currently organic management and those who are interested or recently transitioned to organic management. We drew on some information and numbers from the grain sector and program data that had been collected about who's using POGI tools and what POGI tools were developed and available. We talked to grain buyers and those who are experts in the organic grain sector. And we also worked closely with POGI staff and partners to understand how the program was structured and how tools were developed and rolled out to farmers. And here's some findings. I'll list 6 major findings that are shown in the report. I won't go into too much detail, but please do let me know if you have any questions on the call or take a look at the report as you're able to. So the first major finding was that POGI successfully increased collaboration in the organic sector. This may not be a surprise for those of you, especially if you've joined this call before. This is a simple but powerful way to get people in the sector talking to each other and learning from each other. And more than 30 calls like this have happened since POGI started. There's a number of other ways that people got to be in the same room or on the same calls to learn from each other and work together to address gaps in the sector. And we recommended that future programs that are working in the organic grain sector continue to use many of the ways that POGI developed to work together. There were also some recommendations made for some changes in how the partnerships can work, but overall it was found that it worked effectively. A second major finding was that POGI developed useful tools for organic grain farmers, agronomists, and those interested in transitioning to organic management. So a big finding here was that there was more than 46,000 users to the website, pivotandgrow.com. This does include some people who visited the website more than once, but it shows a very high usage of this website. The most popular pages were price lists, the business-to-business directory, and the list of organic grain buyers. There's also lots of use of resources for transitioning to organic, for production, organic production, and event listings. So as I mentioned, Organic Alberta will keep running that website and the 1-800 number as well. We recommended that future programs should increase awareness of these tools, and that because there has already been that time invested to develop those tools and the structures behind them, like the collaborative structures, even more time and energy and resources can be spent directly supporting farmers with tools like this. The third major finding was that POGI is on the right track to help increase the quality and quantity of organic grain in the prairies. So we did have some very preliminary evidence that quality and quantity of grain is improving, but when we talked to farmers and to experts in the field, many of you won't be surprised that it's really things like weather that can be the biggest factor in determining quality and yield. So data would have to be collected over a long period of time and in a very careful way to really understand the difference in quality and yield over time. And we'd also expect it to take more time than the POGI program has been running to be able to see those kind of changes. However, what we did see was changes in management practices on farms, and we got feedback that POGI made a difference to many of the farmers we talked about. So more than half of the farmers we talked to said that POGI was a major reason for them making important changes to how they managed their farm. There's more detail about this in the report, but what we feel this shows is that the way that POGI worked in terms of offering a variety of resources in a variety of ways helps to increase awareness of best management practices and actually make that difference on farms themselves. Moving forward, we recommended that more work can be done to continue to understand what best management practices are to increase quality and quantity of grain on organic farms, especially when it comes to different conditions and soil types. But future programs can continue to draw on what POGI learned and continue to help farmers make changes on their farms, as well as helping farmers learn from each other. A fourth major finding was that POGI supported the transition to organic management. So over the time that POGI has run, we have seen a 47% increase in acreage for organic field crops. We would not expect POGI to be the major reason for farmers transitioning to organic, but we did get evidence that POGI supported those transitions in being more successful. A fifth major finding was that POGI increased market access for organic grain, for example, by creating an international brand for Prairie organic grains improving information sharing and sharing of data across the value chain, and organizing trade missions and other events. Finally, a sixth major finding is that POGI is on the right track to help create a resilient and stable grain sector. This is a big picture vision for this initiative, and we would expect that it would take time to see a major change in this system. One thing we emphasize in the report is that it's very effective to work towards a big picture vision like this. One of the effective ways to do that is to have some agreement and some detail about what the change looks like that you want to see. So one major thing we include in the final report on the final page is some detail about what we mean by a stable and resilient sector. So it's not just about yields and quantity and profitability, though of course those things are key. It's also about contributing to environmental sustainability and thinking about collaboration and support for and between farmers, helping farmers and the sector itself be able to adapt to changing conditions and to climate and economic upset. So those are the major findings. Thanks again for letting me present those, and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Robin. I think we'll hold off on questions. I'm just going to give a bit of an update on what next. You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that funding had not been secured for POGI 2 or a next phase, which continues to be correct. But I just wanted to let folks know that an application was submitted in January to the Agri-Competitiveness Program with the AAFC. The program was looking as kind of like was to be the next phase of POGI, although because it was going into a federal program, we needed to nationalize the program. So we have included partners from Ontario, and we continue including our colleagues in the Peace region of BC. So that gives it the national scope that's required. There's 4 phases. The first is to create a science-based agronomic extension framework, working with Dr. Martin Enz's group at the University of Manitoba. And the idea behind that was to identify 6 to 10 scientific findings that, if extended to farmers, are most likely to increase yield or quality. The second phase, and sorry, I should have said the application was submitted by the Prairie Organic Development Fund. So the second phase would be PODIF hiring consultants or scientists to develop additional resources to support the scientific agronomic extension framework. Third phase would to actually be to hire agronomists and train them on organic production and how to best extend the resources that have been developed. And then the fourth phase is those agronomists would work with the 3 industry associations across the prairies to do the knowledge transfer work. The bad news is that we heard kind of middle of March that the application was not successful. It was actually rejected on a technicality, saying that the program wasn't open to commodity groups, which it's a little frustrating that we didn't hear that earlier in the process, but also that we're mostly told, at least at a provincial level, that we're not a commodity group. So there seems to be a little mixed messaging going on. Not that that's necessarily unusual, but the good news is that we're being encouraged by staff at the AFC to submit another application, which we're in the process of expanding the scope. So this one was very much focused on grain production. The new application is going to include livestock and vegetable production. To a smaller extent, obviously, because what's most important, obviously, to the prairies and other regions is that the grain production piece. So we're in the process of doing that. The hope is that we will have that revised application in by the end of June, and we will keep everyone posted about that project. All right. Well, because we're pretty much out of time, rather than going through the list of folks on the call, if you have an event or something that you would like to share with the group, maybe just chime in now. Iris and Tara, I know you were going to talk a little bit about some projects that are ongoing or just finishing up. I don't know if you want to do that quickly, just to start us off.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm Tara Stokes. I work for the Prairie Organic Grain Initiative and Communications. And so some things that are continuing on are the website, pivotandgrow.com. So there we'll still have the business-to-business directory, events page, blog, starter kit, continuous social media, as well as email updates and the 1-800 number. So please continue to send people to the website and to those resources. And if you have any resources or events that you want to put up on there, feel free to contact me at the info@pivotandgrow.com email, or you can call the Organic Alberta office. And I guess over to Iris on new projects.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tara. And hello to everyone. It's so great to hear everyone on here again. And I can't believe that this phase of POGI is over. It's been a really fun ride, and I've been really lucky to work with many of you on this call. So thank you to all of you. And even though this part is over, I'm really happy that we're continuing and that Tara Stokes is able to continue managing the website and keep things going, because we actually have quite a bit of new stuff that's coming out in the next little bit. So really quickly, just last week we had our big podcast release. We're very excited about that one. We have Scott Beaton, who's an organic farmer from Manitoba, and he's the host of the podcast, and he gets to interview different experts and farmers. So we have a couple out, and we'll be continuing to release those. We will also have 2 videos that will be coming out in the beginning of July. So the first one is on grain quality. The second one is on cost of production. We are also putting up profiles from nutrient management program. So some of you might be familiar with the program that we had a couple of years ago, where agronomists were paired with farmers to do some on-farm sampling of soil and green manures. So one of the agronomists from that program wrote up a couple of profiles for the farmers that he worked with, so we can just have a bit of a wider learning and sharing from that particular program. We are also doing a champion spotlight, so these are some of the folks that were really involved with the Prairie Organic Grain Initiative, really contributing a lot to the organic community overall. So you can take a look at that. And finally, we are also working on getting some of our material translated into French. So a couple of years ago, we released a series of popular fact sheets, and we'll be getting those translated into French. So yes, even though we're kind of wrapping up this phase, there's still stuff that's coming out. So I'd encourage all of you to keep taking a look. Tara is going to be active on Facebook and Twitter and sending out emails, so please continue taking a look and then sharing with your networks. And that's it for my update.
This is Tia.
Thank you, Iris. Hi, Tia.
Am I able to share a few things?
For sure.
Okay, great. So with the ending of the POGI funding, I just wanted to highlight that we just announced on Friday a large allocation of funding that CODA received in regards to the agri-marketing program on a federal basis. So just to highlight that if any of the stakeholders in the prairies are looking for funding to go to international trade shows, any sort of export-oriented work, we also will be hosting some incoming buyers missions at CHFA East, CHFA West, and we're looking at the Guelph Organic Conference as well. So just to highlight that if anybody is looking for funding to help support your international work, we have received 3 years of funding. We're now on year 2 of it. We were only able to announce it on Friday, but we already received and spent a year's worth of it. And just to highlight, we received notice this morning that CODA continues to sit on the Plant Breeders' Rights Council, which is a formal entity of the government to advise in regards to plant breeders' rights. So just want to highlight that our term has been extended there. It's very important work, particularly in regards to patenting of seeds, etc. So that we will continue to represent the organic sector on. And lastly, Organic Week, our 10-year celebration is coming. So September 9th to the 15th. We have done our meetings. We just kicked it off yesterday, meeting with each one of the Prairie Province associations and how you can get involved at a local level. So I would encourage, if you're, based in one of the 3 different provinces, or if you want to stay more informed, you can go onto the organicweek.ca website and look at ways that you can help promote organic. It's our consumer-oriented campaign where we're really looking at continuing to raise awareness of what does organic mean, dispel myths, as well as build trust in the Canada Organic brand. So that's all for me.
Great. Thank you, Tia. And I'll just give a little update from Sask Organics. We're having a workshop on Friday at Farm Progress Show in the morning, looking at, we're calling it primary and perennial production. So the primary is around crop rotations and crop sequencing, and we have some new data coming out of crop insurance that's going to be presented there on the kind of the best sequencing for crops in your crop rotation. And also a presenter from a researcher from the University of Regina who's developing a new bioherbicide. So we're excited about that. We're at Farm Progress Show. We have a booth there, so if you're there, come by and see us. We're at Ag in Motion in July, and then we have a couple of field days also in July. On the 24th, it's called Covering Our Tracks, so it's looking at grazing and grain production. And on the 26th, there's an organic field walk at the Swift Current Research and Development Center. And I also wanted to talk just very briefly about a project that we're collaborating with CODA on. CODA has provided some funding for Sask Organics to do a survey of our members on the economic impact of glyphosate contamination. So that will be the survey. The plan is to get that out in the next couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to the results and sharing them with everybody. So I think that's it from me. You can find out all about our events on saskorganics.org/events. Thank you, everybody, for being on the call today and over the last 3 years of the Prairie Organic Grain Initiative. We've had some incredibly positive feedback about the calls, and hopefully maybe we'll be able to get another one together when we have some news about the next phase of funding. So just a few to-dos. Notes from the call will be circulated to the group, and Tara will also circulate a list of the people who are on the call and their contact information. So if you want to get in touch with any of them personally, you can do that. And if there's anything else you would like circulated to the group, please send it to Tiara and she will add it to the email. And I think that's it for today. So thank you again, and have a great Wednesday.